So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about what I feel is the most important job we have as parents, aside from doing the very basics of keeping our children safe and protecting them. I feel like, as parents, having worked with over 30,000 children around the world and obviously thousands of parents within that our most valuable time spent with our children is that of teaching them how to live without us. And that might sound kind of strange because it's not something we want to think about as parents. But I really believe that our main job as parents is to empower our children to live up to the difficult challenges that life will inevitably throw at them. It's to prepare them for a challenging life as an adult. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people are approaching parenting and approaching child development and character development, and even the way schools are approaching it is actually very, very different. There seems to be a much greater focus on protection than on empowerment. And protection is super important. It's so important that our children are safe. But it's very short-sighted to think that the best way to keep them safe is to completely protect them from harm, to wrap them up in bubble wrap and make sure they never experience anything uncomfortable. What I've noticed is that it's actually really difficult for children to experience failure. It's actually difficult for children to experience uncomfortability these days. And I wonder if that has a harmful effect on their development. How can we possibly prepare a child for the dangers and the uncomfortability of adult life without giving them micro doses of that experience? One of the ways you prepare a child for a martial arts competition is you make sure they do lots of sparring in class before they go to the big competition. Now, those sparring matches they do in class include competing against people who are stronger than them, who are faster than them, people who have more experience than them. And ultimately, that's a very uncomfortable situation. But within the environment of the dojo, it's safe. They're looked after. But there is this element of fear and uncertainty and uncomfortability that the child has to experience on their own. And there's a great story that I read somewhere, and which I'll share with you now, which I feel really embodies the way in which we approach empowering young people and how important it is for them to experience uncomfortability on their own while also balancing the safety aspect, keeping them safe, which is our duty as parents. So the Cherokee Tribe in North America for a very long time have had a tradition. And the tradition is essentially a rite of passage for young boys before they turn into men. And what they would do is they would send the young boy into the wilderness, and they would have to sit on the top of a hill for a long time on their own. Now, they would blindfold the young boy, and he would have to survive the whole night on his own out in the wilderness. Now, obviously, that's a very dangerous place to be. You can imagine hundreds of years ago, pretty treacherous, lots of wild animals, other tribes, a very dangerous place to be. You can imagine it being pretty terrifying as a young boy having to go through that. But what would happen is the young boy would sit there the whole night, blindfolded, having the courage to do it in order to transition into adulthood. And then what would happen is they would survive the night, they would take the blindfold off, and next to them, they would see their father, who had been up the entire night, keeping them safe, protecting them, and not preventing them from experiencing the uncomfortability of risk. So the father was there the whole time, not letting any danger come to them. But from the child's perspective, they had gone through that rite of passage, believing that they have the ability to have the courage to overcome massive adversity and risk, while also remaining completely safe that the dad was basically there the whole time. And I think that's a really great story, which kind of summarizes how a lot of us, especially within the Warrior Academy, a lot of parents out there who believe in our ethos and the way in which we work with young people, balances safety with empowerment, right? It's not putting your child into something where it's way out of their comfort zone and they're not going to be able to complete it, which brings them into the hyper anxiety stage. If you look at the comfort zone, going too far, they go into the hyper-anxiety stage and they actually retract back into the comfort zone and they don't want to repeat the action. When really what we want to do as mentors, as parents and instructors is bring children out of their comfort zone into the high performance zone where they're doing something that they've got they're highly likely to achieve, but still feels very uncomfortable while being in a safe environment where they can't get injured, they can't get hurt. And I think finding that balance is quite tricky for a lot of parents. And it was interesting because I was looking at a Facebook group the other day, and it was a parenting group in Dubai. And the parent was, one of the parents was mentioning on there how difficult they're finding it is to find this balance. And, their whole point of their post was essentially around protecting their child from ever feeling any fear, any uncertainty, any risk, and any danger, and protecting them entirely from what they called the cruel world. And I think there's something that's in our instincts to do that, of course. What I've typically found with parents, when there's two parents, is there tends to be this balance between one parent being quite protective and preventing their child from experiencing danger, and the other parent who's encouraging their child to take risks and to be uncomfortable, to leave their comfort zone. You typically have this balance going on, which then produces a well-rounded child. But I'm finding nowadays more and more that the balance is swayed into overprotection. You've got terms like helicopter parents and all that sort of stuff. And certainly, if I look back to my childhood compared to what I see nowadays in schools, I feel like children are overprotected a lot. I don't think that the problems in society that we face around danger and risk for young people have necessarily got worse, but they have got more attention. And a lot of that's down to social media. I think we're just more aware of the issues that were always there. So one of the key questions that we've got in the Warrior Academy is how can we empower children? What can we do to really give them the courage to take risks, knowing we're there, and to teach them the process of leaving the comfort zone and making that a normal thing to do? I think that one of the key ways we do that is through the way in which we develop their confidence. And we don't get our children to take massive jumps. Everything is done in small steps. And coming from a background of extreme sports and a background of professional fighting around the world, I'm often asked, how do you have the courage to do a wingsuit base jump off a mountain? Or how do you have the courage to compete professionally in Muay Thai in a stadium in Thailand, or whatever it is? And my instructors would all agree with me. We've all come from a background where we've competed at a high level. And what I say is you can get used to anything. And that sounds really strange, right? Because for a lot of people, they can think that's crazy. There's no way I can get used to some of those, the risks that have been taken by people. But the reality is, if the steps are small enough, then your courage grows and expands gradually. Just a quick shout out to the guys at Shield who manage this podcast, come up with the strategy behind the podcast, help me schedule interviews, as well as do all of the editing and the producing of the podcast. Without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this podcast. If you would like to create your own podcast, I can't recommend the Shield team enough. They have done well over 100 episodes for me over the last few years, and I've been so pleased with the results. So have a look in the description of this video or the podcast episode, and you'll see how to get in touch with them yourself. We wouldn't ask a student on their first class to compete in a competition. But the first thing we do is we implement something called elbow, tummy, shoulder tag, where they learn to have a small amount of contact with another child in a very, very light, playful way. Once they get used to that, they then put gloves on. And now it's light contact, the same game, but with gloves on, wearing sparring kit. And then it's with a helmet on. And now you can touch the head very, very gently. And so very, very carefully, your child is taken through a process where they're encouraged to take very small steps, which they then get used to very quickly, and leave their comfort zone. And we found that it has a really rapid rate of development with children when we do that. It's interesting to me to see how some parents, they push their children too hard, too quickly. They're not ready to leave their comfort zone. They go into that hyper-anxiety stage. They retract into their comfort zone. And a lot of parents come to me and say, I wanted my child to do this, and I wanted them to compete, and I asked them to, and I encouraged them to, and then they don't want to do it anymore. And often that's because they've been pushed too hard. On the flip side of that, when you get to the overprotection and under-empowerment stage, a child's never really been given the opportunity to leave their comfort zone because the parents have been so protective over them. And so I think that's our main job as parents, to find that balance between empowering our children and protecting them. Going back to that Cherokee story, it's about giving them the independence and the intrinsic motivation to leave their comfort zone without us, while providing that safety net and making sure they understand that we're always there. That's, for me, the key job as parents. And it ties very neatly into the bullying work that we've done. One of the key things I believe about bullying, having worked with thousands of children through bullying and helped so many parents navigate the very, very difficult transition of bullying, is that bullying is an uncomfortable part of the human experience, but not something we can prevent entirely. I'll talk about this on another episode because it needs several deep dives to really dig into, and I've written a book about this as well. But ultimately, we can't prevent our children going through bullying. We can't prevent our children going through lots of difficult transitions like changing school, like adolescence, like bullying. But what we can do is empower them to overcome those transitions on their own. One of the things I always say at our character development workshops is I love my children just like you, but one thing I know for sure is that I can't always be there for my children. All I can do is empower them to overcome life's obstacles without me. And that's what I feel is the most important job we've got as parents. Let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel or the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. See you all next time. I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the breakthrough area assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the breakthrough area assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.